The night and morning in Kupyansk became a time when history itself seemed to hold its breath. The city, long considered a hub and gateway to eastern Ukraine, found itself at the center of a major military operation. Reports came in one after another. Russian units entered the northern districts of the city. The main supply routes were under control. Now the whole world is watching to see how events will unfold. It is no coincidence that Kupyansk is called the third capital of Ukraine. It is not just a city in the Kharkiv region. It is a place where rail and road arteries connecting the east with the west and south of the country converge. It is here that the most important supply hubs are concentrated, through which cargo, fuel, ammunition, and equipment for the armed forces of Ukraine passed. When it became known at the end of August that Russian forces had not only broken through to the northern outskirts, but had also effectively taken control of the main roads to the west and east, experts immediately began talking about a new phase of the conflict. Whereas previously there had been talk of positional battles and slow advances, the situation now resembles a spring being compressed. Preparations for the operation have been underway for a long time. For many weeks, news reports have been appearing that Russian units are strengthening their positions in the north and south of the Kharkiv region. Artillery work is being carried out, unmanned aerial vehicles are being used for reconnaissance, and pressure is being exerted along the entire line of contact. It is gradually becoming clear that Kupyansk will be the focus of these efforts. This city is of particular importance to Ukraine, not only militarily but also symbolically. In the fall of 2022, fierce battles were fought for control of Kupyansk. At that time, Ukrainian units were able to enter the city, but after a while they were again under threat. History seems to be repeating itself, only now the stakes are much higher. Today, the northern part of Kupyansk is already partially occupied by Russian forces. This is confirmed not only by official sources, but also by numerous images from the combat zone. Columns of military equipment can be seen moving along the outskirts, and positions are being fortified at key intersections. The first official statements were made almost immediately. Russian sources reported that Kupyansk had been taken in a pincer movement. This means that the main supply routes are blocked and Ukrainian units have fewer and fewer opportunities to maneuver. The Kyiv authorities responded by saying that the situation was difficult, but that control over part of the city remained. Meanwhile, international observers note that the fall of Kupyansk will not be just a tactical success. It could change the configuration of the entire front line in eastern Ukraine. Izium, Balaklia, Sloviansk, and Kramatorsk, all these cities will face a new threat. It is no coincidence that Kupyansk has become the arena for a new operation. The city in the Kharkiv region has long been considered a key point controlling supply flows. To understand the scale of what is happening, one must imagine a map of the region. Railway lines converge here, forming a junction through which trains pass to the east and south. Highways connect Kupyansk with Izium, Balaklia, and further on with Slaviansk and Kramatorsk. In fact, whoever controls Kupyansk has the opportunity to influence the entire group of Ukrainian troops in the eastern direction. Preparations for the offensive proceeded gradually. Russian units reinforced their positions in the north of the Kharkiv region, conducted reconnaissance, and struck supply depots. This went on for weeks. Local residents reported constant artillery fire, drone flights, and movements of military equipment. It seemed that the front had frozen, but in fact all this was just preparation for a new stage. At the end of August, the climax came. Reports began to arrive from several directions at once. Russian units began moving from the north and northeast. The first step was to block Highway N26. This road connects Kupyansk with Svatovo and the Luhansk region. Blocking it meant that supplies to the Ukrainian armed forces were seriously threatened. Almost simultaneously, work began on the southern approaches. There, Russian units did not launch a direct offensive, but created constant pressure. This distracted the attention and resources of the Ukrainian military, forcing them to transfer reserves. As a result, Kiev's forces were stretched thin, and their ability to maneuver was reduced to a minimum. Historians note that the significance of Kupyansk goes beyond current events. In 1941, this city briefly became the capital of the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. When Kyiv and Kharkiv were under threat, The authorities were located here and decisions were made here. Therefore, today's events are perceived not only as a military operation, but also as a step with deep symbolic significance. The first official statements were made almost simultaneously. The Russian side reported that the city had been taken in a pincer movement. This expression means that the main supply routes have been cut off and the garrison is semi-encircled. The Ukrainian authorities confirmed that the situation was difficult, but announced that they would continue to defend the city. The situation on the ground was dramatic. The first columns of Russian equipment appeared in the northern parts of the city. This was confirmed by video footage and photographs. Fighting was taking place on the outskirts and artillery activity was intensifying. Residents reported a continuous rumbling and said that smoke from the fires was visible for tens of kilometers. International observers also took note of what was happening. They noted that the capture of Kupyansk could be the key to further advances to the west. If the city comes under the full control of Russian units, this will create conditions for pressure on Izium and Balaklia, and in the long term, on Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, which remain important centers of Ukrainian defense. Some analysts compare this operation to a methodical tightening of the vice. First, roads are blocked, then the outskirts are fortified, and then there is a gradual advance toward the center. This approach minimizes losses and deprives the enemy of the ability to maneuver. Other experts say that the scenario resembles events in Ugledar, where the city was also under prolonged pressure and was gradually blocked. The political background should not be forgotten either. Kupyansk has long been mentioned in statements by both sides. For Kyiv, holding the city meant maintaining control over logistics in the region. For Moscow, it meant an opportunity to show that the offensive was continuing and yielding results. Therefore, reports of the advance of Russian units received wide coverage not only in military but also in political circles. The situation remains tense. Ukrainian troops are reportedly trying to hold their positions in the central areas, but their resources are running low. Attempts to bring in reinforcements are complicated by blocked roads. Both sides are actively using drones. This turns every kilometer of the front line into a field of constant surveillance. This is how a new reality was formed. Step by step, Kupyansk was turning into a city under siege, and although the outcome of the operation is still unclear, it is already obvious that this is not a local episode, but an event that could affect the entire front line. When it became known that Kupyansk was surrounded, political and military analysts began to talk about a new phase in the conflict. This city has never been just a point on the map. It has become a symbol for both sides. For Ukraine, it is a strategic supply line and stronghold, the retention of which allowed it to maintain control over the east of the country. For Russia, it is an opportunity to demonstrate that operations are continuing with increasing intensity and are yielding tangible results. The international reaction has been mixed. European countries, which had previously actively supported Kyiv, chose to remain cautious in the early hours. Official statements contain general phrases about the need to hold the front line, but no specific assessments of what was happening were given. Analysts explain this by the fact that the capture of Kupyansk could change the entire strategic picture, and therefore, Western capitals are in no hurry to comment until the outcome becomes clear. The United States has stated that it is closely monitoring the situation. Representatives of the military department noted that they will continue to provide assistance to Kyiv, including arms supplies and financial support. However, even in these statements, a sense of caution was evident. Experts point out that the fall of Kupyansk would mean that the Ukrainian army has lost one of its key supply hubs, and then the volume of Western aid may not play a decisive role. The events have caused a stir within Ukraine. The Kiev authorities have acknowledged that the situation in the city is extremely difficult. In his evening address, the country's president said that the defense was continuing, but stressed the need for additional supplies of equipment and ammunition. At the same time, independent sources report tension in society. Comments are appearing on social media that the population is tired of constant fighting and forced evacuations. Some experts draw parallels with the events of 1922. At that time, Ukrainian units managed to recapture Kupyansk, which became a symbol of the counteroffensive. Today, the situation is reversed. The city is once again under threat and may finally fall under Russian control. This creates psychological pressure. For Ukraine, the loss of the city will be perceived as a step backward, while for Russia, it will be an important argument in political negotiations. Predictions about how things will go from here are all over the place. Some analysts think Russian units will focus on strengthening the perimeter and gradually push into the city. This would help them avoid big losses and slowly but surely take away the Ukrainian forces' ability to maneuver. Other experts suggest that the operation could take on a rapid pace if a decision is made to make a sharp breakthrough to the center. A third option cannot be ruled out. The Ukrainian side may launch a counterattack, attempting to break through the ring and regain control of at least part of the roads. But this would require significant reserves, which, according to experts, Kiev currently lacks. Moreover, supply lines are severely complicated, and the transfer of equipment and personnel is fraught with constant risk. The international community is preparing for any of these scenarios. The possible consequences for energy security and logistics are being discussed behind the scenes in European capitals. After all, routes that affect not only military but also economic processes pass through the Kharkiv region. A reduction in Kyiv's control over this region could increase tensions in the supply chain, which would inevitably affect prices and market stability. It is also important to note the information component. Kupyansk has become the subject of a media battle. Russian and Ukrainian sources publish conflicting versions of events. Some speak of an almost complete encirclement, while others claim that control remains intact. In such a situation, information becomes a weapon. Every statement, every frame, every post on social media plays a role in shaping public opinion. Looking at the long-term outlook, the situation in Kupyansk could be a turning point. If the city falls completely under Russian control, it will open the way to the south and west. Then Izium, Balaklia, and eventually Slavyansk and Kramatorsk will be under threat. For Ukraine, this will mean the need to strengthen new lines of defense, which will require enormous resources. For Russia, the capture of Kupyansk will be not only a military but also a political success. It can be presented as proof of the effectiveness of the chosen strategy. Domestically, such a result will be used to strengthen public support. On the international stage, it will create leverage in negotiations, showing that the initiative is gradually shifting to one side. However, the situation remains dynamic. Any mistake, any delay can change the picture. War is always unpredictable. That is why analysts try to consider several scenarios at once, but they agree on one thing. The events in Kupyansk have already made history and will have consequences that will extend far beyond this city. Today, Kupyansk has become a symbol of tension, a symbol of a new phase of the conflict, a symbol of how one city can influence the fate of an entire region. Every piece of news from there is perceived not as a local report, but as part of a larger picture involving military operations, politics, international relations, and the future of tens of thousands of people. When Russian units reached the northern outskirts, the situation changed immediately. When the roads used to supply the Ukrainian armed forces came under control, it became clear that the ring was beginning to tighten. For residents, this resulted in evacuations and fear for their lives. For the military, it became a matter of survival and maintaining control over a strategic hub. Today, Kupyansk is effectively divided. The north and east are under pressure from Russian forces. The central areas are held by Ukrainian units, but without adequate supplies. The southern direction remains the only route through which movement is still possible, but it too is under threat of being blocked. This situation creates an atmosphere of anxiety. Every report from the city conveys a sense of tension. Journalists working in the region describe thick smoke over neighborhoods, destroyed houses, and lines of cars waiting to leave. Social media is filled with images of people in basements listening to distant explosions. International experts emphasize that even if Kupyansk falls completely under Russian control, it will only be a stage. The fight will continue for new cities and new supply lines. But it is this episode that will go down in history as a turning point. It will show how important logistics and strategy are. It will serve as an example of how one node can change the dynamics of the entire front line. For Ukraine, the loss of Kupyansk will be painful. It is not only the loss of a key supply point, but also a blow to morale. After all, 2 years ago, this was one of the symbols of the counteroffensive. Now the situation is turning in the opposite direction. This will spark internal discussions and call into question the effectiveness of the current strategy. For Russia, success in Kupyansk will be an opportunity to declare that the objectives of the operation are being achieved. This will be presented as proof that methodical pressure is yielding results. On the international stage, such a move will be used in negotiations and diplomatic games. But at the same time, we must not forget the humanitarian aspect. Any city is first and foremost about people. These are families who are losing their homes. These are children who are forced to live in basements. These are elderly people who cannot leave and remain under the sounds of fighting. For them, what is happening is a tragedy that will leave a mark for life. Analysts predict that in the coming weeks, the situation in Kupyansk will become a litmus test for the entire conflict. The outcome of this operation will determine not only the military map, but also the political agenda. If the city ends up under Russia's full control, the balance of power will shift. If Ukrainian troops manage to hold on to at least part of the territory and break through the ring, it will be a big win for Kyiv. However, everything so far suggests that the outcome is already being decided. Every road, every hill, every street is becoming part of a major confrontation. And it is here that the next stage will be determined. History is always built on specific moments. Today, Kupyansk is such a moment. Its fate will influence the future of the entire region. And we will follow this together with you, providing full analysis, analytical materials, and reports. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new episodes. There are many events ahead, and each one will bring us closer to understanding where this story is going.